double down on our efforts to catch up with science and technology and innovation. Science and technology and innovation, these are indispensable in the modern economy, in the modern world.
The problem being that, while we have our PhDs here, there aren't enough of us. And everywhere else in the world, for research to be successful, you need a complete research group.
It's very important that the PASA members and scientists based in the Philippines are continuously in contact, so we will know the needs of the Filipinos and opportunities that the Filipinos can have to do science with their PASA counterparts.
I think that is one of the good programs that they keep on supporting some of the initiatives of our researchers and scientists here in the country.
The role of this cooperation among these government agencies really is to be able to attract science and technology global-based companies to set up shop here. And that is really key in terms of developing the science and technology innovation ecosystem in the country.
We really need to ratchet up the appreciation, the recognition of the importance of science and technology and innovation.
And we are all trying to attain what we call the common good, the greater, higher, long-term good of the Filipino people.
Okay, we're on. Good evening to everyone in the Philippines watching. Good morning to those who are in the States, and good afternoon to everyone elsewhere. This is day 2. If you just joined in, PAAS's a week of pro-science activism, finding common ground for building a robust post-COVID STI, meaning science and technology innovation ecosystem in the Philippines. I'm Dr. Maria Luisa Virata. I'm the PAASE treasurer right now. I've served in PAASE in different positions over the years, but now I'm the PAASE treasurer as well as a member of the board of directors. I'm also a regulatory scientist at the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. And co-moderating with me today is Dr. Christina Binag. Tina, would you like to greet the audience?
Hi, thank you, Lisa. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. And we're happy to be with you. Day 2 of our pro-science activism. Magandang umaga sa iyo dyan, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Binag from the University of Santo Tomas, professor of chemistry and currently a member of the board of PAASE. Lisa?
Okay. So let us, for those who just joined in, we had a very productive day yesterday, day 1. And if you'd like to get a short recap, let's see. So yesterday, we had to, we went over some introductions on why we're having this week of pro-science activism. And it's mainly centered around this white paper that Dr. Gisela Concepcion and Dr. CP David had posted, as a result of discussions from the Fireside Chats, episodes 1 to 3, if you've been watching our PAASE webinars, and they were had written this paper on SNT, Science and Technology, Human Capital Development, and listed the problems, the challenges, and some solutions they're proposing to build this ecosystem that we want to have in the Philippines. And so Giselle gave some background, how it came about, the history, and all of this you can read. This paper is like 9 pages. It's posted on the PAASE website. So if you go to paase.org, you'll find it there under the position papers tab. And we also had Dr. Joel Coelho talk about his shorter paper, which was on building R1 research universities in the Philippines. He recommends this as a way forward, for us to progress and build a STI ecosystem. So we also had discussants, yesterday from NEDA, DTI, Department of Agriculture and Industries. They had enumerated on, from their perspective, the challenges that they have faced in trying to establish a robust R&D ecosystem, because that was what Joel was proposing, actually, to have an R&D centers, actually the research, universities, to have these R&D centers established where they are, and that should, as well as having R&D centers elsewhere, other institutions, so that should help close the gaps, and the cycle, between academe, government, and industries, is to have a lot of these R&D centers established strategically. And the discussants yesterday shared their best practices that they have learned from, looking at other countries, how they do it there, how it can be implemented in the Philippines. They also proposed solutions, how to address these challenges. And I'm just reading, what was summarized yesterday, if you don't mind. 2 of the main challenges mentioned in the SNT Human Capital Development are the challenge to build an educated and scientific manpower, the challenge to sustain the support for human resources. And they said also to enhance the quality of higher education and research partnerships between the Philippines and foreign universities should be encouraged, supported. Tax incentives can be given to enterprises to attract them, take part in building public-private partnerships in setting these R1 universities. Programs are needed to attract more Filipino researchers, especially the young Filipino scientists, to conduct R&D activities. And from learning the best practices by other countries, they also emphasize that at least good research directions could be set, attractive research funding, patent incentives, and research facilities should also be provided. We also heard yesterday that to support R&D activities and attract capital investments, the partnerships between the universities and private sectors, industry or global R&D companies should also be strengthened. And it's important to link the research work to national priorities by improving the societal outcome impact of our R&D work. And that is to make the R&D work relevant. And one example was about, integrating AI, artificial intelligence technology into R&D work, or it could be also proposing science-based decisions, strategies in addressing or solving these COVID-related issues. And in these setups, the researchers should be able to carry out basic research, whereas the industries or government agencies should be able to commercialize and use these findings, from the advanced research. And these should create a cycle, making the R&D activities more sustainable. And another challenge that was mentioned by the discussants were the policies that undermine the limited support to R&D and innovation. And there are existing policies that drain our resources, which could have been rechanneled, to R&D. And one example mentioned was the free tuition program being implemented at the state university and colleges. And these in turn financially constricted the R&D activities. Science should be allowed to dominate in policy making. Therefore, national leaders and policymakers should submerge their self-interest in favor of public interest and see the value of science and technology to advance the development of our country. Those types of leaders are needed. And it was during the open forum that we heard some suggestions mentioned to improve the STI ecosystem in the Philippines. And these included establishing a high-level science advisory committee for the president of the Philippines, having direct communications between department secretaries and CEOs of the companies, and also taking advantage of the current resources we have. One example was the tobacco, and to create some high value commodity from them and become a more competitive global player. Okay, I think that pretty much summarizes what was discussed yesterday, and we're ready to proceed today with our distinguished panel. Most of them are from the academe, and let's start. Tina?
Yes, thank you very much, Elisa. And once again, good morning and good evening to everyone. For this day too, we have renowned academic leaders, and we have 5 of these academic leaders. And to start off, we have our first discussant, Dr. Esther Garcia. She's currently the president of the University of the East, and she was the chair of the Commission on Higher Education from 1999 to 2003. She was one of the influencer for the creation of the PhD consortium in chemistry. And I think during that time, it was able to graduate 25 PhDs in chemistry at the University of the Philippines. For her vision of getting the critical mass to one day, I think it's almost happening now, putting our country in the science and technology map. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Esther Garcia. Dr. Garcia.
Good evening, good day, everyone. As I was listening to the introduction by Dr. Virata, just about everything I'm going to say is already in that short discussion of yesterday's results. But anyway, and you will see this as we go along. I was expected basically to look at it from the HRD perspective, because considering that I was higher education perspective, considering that I was chair of the Commission on Higher Education. But first slide, please. What do you expect of higher education institutions in research, development, innovation? Of course, human resource development is to produce high-level professionals. Of course, we are talking here of researchers and innovators and entrepreneurs. The second, of course, is actual conduct of R&D, not only the basic research, but also translational undertaking, so that this will be in partnership with industry and other end users. Acknowledging these critical roles, the Commission on Higher Education was created in 1994, separated actually from the Department of Education, with mandate to direct and support higher education institutions in performing instruction, research, and extension functions. Next slide, please. Next slide. Now, before the higher prior slide. Prior to the creation of Commission on Higher Education, there was a so-called Edcom, the Educational Commission. It's a legislative commission headed by then Senator Angara, the late Senator Angara, and they noted the following: a very low rate of public investment in research, inadequate or lack of research facilities and library resources, lack of researchers and research faculty, as you were mentioning earlier, and underdeveloped graduate programs. I have lots of stories on this. For example, underdeveloped graduate programs. When I was in CHED, I used to read some of the supposed master's thesis and even the doctoral thesis. And I said to myself, I wouldn't even accept this for a bachelor's degree thesis. That is how bad, the graduate programs were, or I don't know now. I haven't read their thesis except for the places the bigger institutions I work with. So these are the problems there, and as I will show it later on, these are the problems still. Okay, next slide, please. Next slide. Now, of course, we had major initiatives to address these challenges. We had the Engineering and Science Education Project mentioned earlier. Prior to the ESEP, we had the PhD Consortium Program, Ateneo UP LaSalle, where we produced quite a few PhDs in math, chemistry, and physics. In fact, some of you here are products of that program. And ESEP, on the other hand, Rowena Guevara, the DOST secretary, and at some point, all the vice presidents of the three big universities, were products of that ESEP, which I also headed at one point. And then when I was already in the Commission on Higher Education, we started the so-called National Higher Education Research Agenda, about the same time that I was chair in 1998. And this went on up to 2018. This was supposed to provide policies, directions, and priorities for research. And we also established what we called zonal and regional research centers, provided some funds for research, faculty scholarships, conference grants, rewards, and incentives. And we developed a journal accreditation system. But the budget was very small. You can imagine a total budget of 376 million to do all of this. NERA 2 supposedly was targeted to have a total budget of 6 billion, but only 644 million was utilized. So again, I think it's partly because of inefficiency on the part of the research institutions, but also for some reasons that I will discuss later on. During my term, I also established what we called, what actually it was provided by law in the law creating the commission. It provided a higher education development fund, and also provided for the development of centers of excellence and centers of development, faculty development programs, facilities upgrading projects, and what they call institutional development innovation grant, just for improving the facilities. And this was, now, in the centers of excellence, they were supposed to receive money every year for their projects. Unfortunately, in fact, we have one in UAE in IT. However, there is now a policy of COA and DBM that the private higher education institutions, which are supposedly for profit, meaning they are owned by stockholders, that cannot receive any fund from this. So, which is not the original intention of the law. Next slide, please. Next slide. And then, of course, there was the so-called PICARI. This was started by Dado Manataw and a foundation here in the Philippines, and then it was funded by government. This was approved in 2013, but started only in 2015, and had quite a bit of commitment for funding. 1.763 billion for the first year, for 5 years per year, for 5 years, for an 8.8 billion total. It's a joint project between Philippine higher education institutions here and higher education institutions in California. It was started by Dado Manataw, you know Dado. It was a collaborative enterprise where they were supposed to produce research and, of course, train new scientists using this cooperative arrangement. It was initially quite good. There were 44 approved projects, which 18 were completed, and there were some 70 MS and PhD scholars supported, and 5 postdoctoral fellows were sent to University of California. Unfortunately, I think, again, for reasons I will discuss later on, it will now be transformed to what they call collaborative and integrative development, research for development. And they will now supposedly include other universities in the Philippines, and also universities other than those in the California system. That would be okay if it's really implemented properly. Next slide, please. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the challenges remain, and that the problems identified by Edcom are still here to challenge us. The percentage of these problems could in turn be traced to or related to the following: failure to sustain and follow through on major initiatives and maximize benefits from the gains. this is the sad part. Tendency to phase out or scale down programs before their target end dates and replace this with programs, and I quote, closer to the hearts of successor administrators. That is the big problem. Pag dumating yung bago, hindi na pwede yan. Akin naman. Okay. The next is, the second reason is, there's a need to improve coordination and collaboration among R&D and S&T institutions. Again, this is one characteristic of people is the tendency to put up rigid delineations of responsibility, which I call turfing. It's actually a turfing issue more than anything else. And that makes us overlook the need for augmentation and complementation. And then the third is the one-size-fits-all approach to governance, including R&D, regardless of the complexity of the problems and the diversity of the activities involved. Universities have to follow the same processes required of the line agencies. If DPWH, this is the rule for DPWH, that should also be the rule for a research agency. Of course, adversely affecting timely delivery of outputs and services, and then we don't have anymore a facilitative environment. Next slide, please. Next slide. Difficulties of accessing or utilizing government funds that are made available for research. I'm sure the faculty members of UP are quite familiar with this. Lengthy and unfacilitated proposal evaluation and project monitoring procedures. Bureaucratic rigidities, regulatory policies that inhibit research from lifting off or require substantial amount of effort to comply. Old and established practices that are no longer appropriate. And these are especially bad for when we do collaborative work or when we have international undertakings. There is also an observed bias in favor of public higher education institutions. For example, last year, was it the budget out of 200-something million, only about 2% went to 3 private HCIs. All the rest went to the public sector. And as I told you earlier, the centers of excellence, which are supposedly for profit, are stock corporations like UE, can no longer access these funds. This is no longer allowed by COA and DBM. I've been fighting this because in the law creating CHED and providing funds, the higher education development funds, that was never the intention. In the law, it's very clear that the higher education development fund shall be used for developing institutions and to incentivize the good ones. And that was the reason why during my time as CHED chair, we used to give money to the schools, so many million a year, if you are a center of excellence. And this one was renewable every 5 years. I mean, you are monitored and assessed, and you can be a center of excellence again or another 5 years. At the level of institutions, inadequate support systems needed by faculty and graduate students in terms of time off or sabbatical leave or lack of funds. Just to give you an example, in UE, we do have we have a so-called Teach 12, Pay 30. We are talking in terms of number of units because our faculty are paid by units. Teach 12, Pay 30, meaning 18 units is equivalent is for research. However, I can tell you that that is one of the best in the whole U-Belt area. So you can just imagine the situation for the others. Number 6, the need to foster closer partnership between academia and industry. this is sorely lacking in the Philippines. Very little. Well, there have been a few lately. For example, the one between a university in Bicol and one with Dole, Philippines. Next slide, please. Recommendations. RA 11293, the so-called Philippine Innovation Act, while it promises, I read the law, promises to address, at least on paper, most if not all of the said challenges. Earmarking multi-year budgets for R&D could ensure continuity of initiatives. Creation of a National Innovation Council with strong authority could address coordination problems, and a relevant and responsive national innovation agenda and scientific document, which could unify and direct R&D initiatives. I do not know if some of those who prepared this law or supported it in Congress are here. But when I was reading it, I was reminded of a similar council many years ago. During the time of President GMA, there was a so-called Science and Technology Coordinating Council, and it was at the highest level. The president as chair, and business sector was, it was co-chaired by a business, by someone from the business sector, no less than JASA. Okay, Subel Dayala. And we used to be all there. Big table in Malacanang, all of the people were there, and we were listening to the perorations of President GMA. Finally, the business sector got tired of all these sermons, and they slowly left the meeting. So nothing came out of it. I hope that this will not happen to NIC. Okay, because that was supposed to have basically the same objectives as this one. High-level decision making so that things will move. Okay. Now, but hope springs eternal. So here are my recommendations. On the part of the chaired SUCs and private HEIs, they should now start preparing inputs for the National Innovation Agenda and Scientific Document, considering, among others, and as you already mentioned, the impact on the pandemic and how the sector should respond to the requirements of new normal. Insights and findings reflected in the Global Innovation Index, which could guide in identifying priority areas and strategies for improving our Global Innovation Index in the future. And HEIs with potential for development could be developed into R1 and R2 universities, and their needs towards developing into doctoral universities. Next slide, please. Continue adopting the PICARI International Cooperative Model for upgrading the capacity of HEIs for research that will translate to technological innovations, strategic policies, and solutions for addressing societal problems. Concretize how RA 11293 provisions such as Rules 4E and 24 on removing barriers to innovation by initiating conversations between and among concerned agencies, CHED, DBM, DOST, higher education institutions, COA, and others, to identify barriers and consolidate recommendations for eliminating these. Resuscitate and ala AMRO, I will discuss AMRO later on, initiative to suit current special requirements. What is this AMRO? Some years back, we had the so-called auditing manual auditing and monitoring, if I remember correctly, manual for research organizations. And this was really a special, these are special rules, auditing rules for those doing research and for scholarship grants. However, some years back, how long ago was that? Shell Abito was the, well, it was already gone when Shell Abito became DBM, NEDA secretary. They removed this. And that's why, if you remember the problems that I was telling earlier about bureaucratic requirements, etc., that is when AMRO was removed. They don't use AMRO anymore. And we have been trying to get NEDA, several secretaries of NEDA now and COA have been talking, but up to now, that's still the case. And in fact, I told you earlier about the centers of excellence losing their money. That's because of this provision. Private schools should not receive any government because they are supposed to be making money. Okay. And that's also the difficulty with having industry partners, because they cannot touch the money of government under these current rules. Funding providers to continue practice of requiring R&D proponents to include in the project design the actual or proposed engagement of industry and other end users. Again, that was a policy that was started during the time of Secretary Foliosco. If you want to get money from government, you should have an industry partner. But with number 3, then that is no longer possible. Is there any more? Okay, I guess that's it. I forgot to tell you about the difficulties in the budgeting. If you want money now from government, if you want your money in 2023, you have to propose it March of 2021. See, by the time that you need the money, the project probably laos na. So those are the difficulties that Filipino researchers have to contend with. I'm sorry, I think I
Yes, ma'am. But we wanted you to finish, so and you had
no, you should have stopped me.
No, that's fine. We want to hear all the
Difficulties.
all the difficulties from your perspective. It was, in other words, I found it's complicated talaga.
Thank you. Thank you for that, no, Dr.
Marami akong kwento. Mamaya.
Yes.
Kwento ako.
Yes, we'll have time later in the open forum for more discussion. That's fine, ma'am. We wanted to hear everything.
I was wondering because I had no timer. I said,
yeah. I want to remind our speakers today, we are going to limit your time to 10 minutes. And obviously, Ma'am Garcia went over, but
30 minutes?
10.
Hindi naman.
But
and likewise,
we wanted to hear everything. So let me go to the next discussant. This is Dr. Now he's a doctor, Dr. Alfredo Pascual, President of UP, University of the Philippines in 2011 to 2017. He's now the president of the Management Association of the Philippines. You know, this is after being with UP. And I was fortunate enough to have met him at Quezon Hall on a number of occasions. And he also came to visit our UPAA chapter in DC and in the DC area. So without further ado, President Pascual, you have the floor.
Thank you, Lisa. I didn't know that we needed to prepare slides. I was told when I was invited that I am supposed to just give an informal talk about my experience in UP. So that's what I'll do, and I hope you will excuse me for not having the same intensive and extensive presentation of Esther.
Madaldal lang ako.
That's
Well,
fine. That's
let
fine.
me start. I will focus on UP first, because that's where I had 6 years of my life dedicated in governing and running a university. Well, as you know, under the charter of 2008 of the University of the Philippines, UP is mandated, among others, to serve as a research university in various fields of expertise and specialization by conducting basic and applied research, promoting research and development, contributing to the dissemination and application of knowledge. So it's already a modern definition, farther away from the Humboldtian concept of university because of this provision on application of knowledge. So what did I do? Well, of course, I developed a strategic plan to implement the mandates of the university. And one of those mandates, of course, is what I presented, which is about UP being a research university. So what things did we do to transform UP into a research-intensive university? We created an enabling environment for research and innovation. In 2011, within a few months in office, we finalized the UP Intellectual Property Rights Policy and formed the UP Technology Transfer and Business Development Office. This, I think, if we are to pursue the mandate of applying knowledge, there has to be protection of intellectual property and the proper transfer of this intellectual property to commercial users. In particular, the UP Technology Transfer and Business Development Office is tasked to implement the IPR policy and to promote, protect, and manage all intellectual properties of the university, including plant varieties, through informed technology licensing and other commercialization platforms, including university-based spin-off companies and enterprises. Well, one enterprise that we initially funded with a small support was the project of Raul Destura, that produced a number of diagnostic kits. The last one being for COVID-19. The UPTT BDO, that's the short name, serves an essential instrument of our administration for innovation and entrepreneurship. To increase patent filings, we introduced the Invention Disclosure Incentive Program, IDI, in 2015. The IDI program provides a monetary incentive to a researcher who reports the existence of potential IPR in research work and assigns this IP to UP. And under the IPR regulation, there is a sharing of the economic gains from the IP. In 2012, my second year in UP, we launched the Emerging Interdisciplinary Research Program, or EIDR, for which I allocated ₱1 billion from UP's resources. EIDR laid the groundwork for establishing a research culture in UP by getting its research experts from different units of the system to collaborate and mentor the present and future generations of UP researchers. There were 65 projects funded under EIDR. The rule is there has to be at least 2 units of the university involved, so that the multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary aspect are respected. One significant thing to take care of course, is the incentive for the faculty. In addition to research funding, we did some effort to enhance creative work and research grant program. We provided startup research funding to our recruits under the UP Balik PhD program, one program that was started during my time with that monetary incentive. We thought that it's cheaper to bring those with already PhD degrees and research experience among our alumni and who are working abroad back to UP rather than to train our young faculty. It will take time, but we were in a hurry, so we exerted effort to bring back existing PhDs, but alumni of UP in the undergrad. Billions of external funding for research were also mobilized, of course, from the usual suspects, the OST, CHED, PICARI, in particular, USAID STRIDE program, and the UK Newton Fund. I think all in all, we had the funding of over, I can't remember the exact figure now, 4 billion to 6 billion pesos. To improve infrastructure for research, I allocated funds for modern laboratories. Example, the 350 million peso funding for the new Philippine Genome Center complex in UP Diliman. Another is the 1 billion peso allocation for the multi-level National Institutes of Health building in UP Manila. And given all the problems that Esther talked about in government procedures, that building took a while to get started. But now you can see the tall structure in UP Manila, which is this National Institutes of Health building. This will house the existing 13 institutes and centers of NIH. We also allocated 650 million pesos for new and renovated laboratories in different constituent units of UP. In the Philippine General Hospital, which is can be considered as a well, it's a service hospital, but significant part of it is really dedicated to research. Because it carries out significant research activities on top of that public service mandate. We were able to allocate to PGH more than 3.7 billion for investment in new modern hospital and laboratory instruments. When I took over, the budget of UP was on the decline. And I worked hard to turn things around, and was very happy to achieve success. By the time I left, our MOE has gone up by a factor of 5, from no capital allocation or capital funding for new infrastructure. We were, during the 6-year period I was there, we were able to get from the government funding of more than 12 billion pesos. We shifted the academic calendar to an August start in order to minimize the gap in the start and end of our semesters relative to our university partners in the region and beyond. And with more synchronized academic calendars, we hope and we actually experience facilitating academic exchanges and easing research collaborations between UP and our partner universities. Now, you cannot have just infrastructure, you need the superstructure. So we strengthened the faculty. We exerted efforts to increase the proportion of faculty members with advanced degrees, particularly doctorates. Among the measures implemented were the allocation of more funds for advanced studies of qualified faculty members abroad or locally. And as already mentioned, we instituted the UP Balik PhD program, and we offered UP doctoral programs across campuses. So the Diliman faculty would run doctoral programs in, say, Visayas, Mindanao, and UP Los Baños would do the same in other campuses. Further incentives are given to faculty in terms of grant for research and creative work. This enhanced monetary award actually facilitated the increase in international publications, which towards the end of my term brought UP into the ranking, the university ranking of the Times Higher Education. As a more substantive incentive to the faculty, we created over 800, this is 801 UP Professorial Chairs in 2015. That was the first time in UP for such a considerable number of professorial chairs to recognize excellence in research in particular, but also in teaching and public service. And we were able to make it in one go. Initially, I allocated UP's earnings from the UP Town Center, which we also built. But eventually, I got funding from the government through an allocation in our budget. Now, when I started, I didn't have any illusion, that the long-term vision that I laid down, which is to make UP a great university serving the country and its people, that I will fully achieve this vision. My goal was to really lay the groundwork and indicate the path towards that vision, and hope that my successor, would continue what we started. That is one important lesson we have to learn. And I have known this already. It's a risk, because this is how the so-called democratic governance has been implemented in our country, even at the national governance level. Presidents are changed frequently. Used to be every 4 years with one re-election. Now 6 years, no re-election. Too long for a bad president, too short for a good president. We've had good presidents, I should say. I will not name names, but you would know. And you would have wanted that president to have another term, but of course he didn't have the same predisposition as the others who tried to do it by doing something else outside the democratic process. Anyway, I noticed also that the governance, there are weaknesses in the governance aside from the term of the president. I found out, based on my interaction with university presidents that have undergone very significant transformation, is that it takes at least 8 to 10 to 12 years to really achieve significant transformation, particularly in transforming a university into a research-oriented one. And in our current state of governance, that's not possible. So we run the risk, which Esther has already pointed out, that one president will start something and the next president will try to reinvent the wheel and start new programs all over again. Too bad. There are other issues with respect to our governance. It was not mentioned, but after UP, I actually embarked on a career of corporate governance advocacy. Well, now I've added public governance to that advocacy. And we've been trying to promote the idea that, in fact, universities are now corporate bodies. We are incorporated. So we should operate like corporations where the board of directors or the board of regents should really exercise the governance responsibility and authority in directing the operation of each and every university governed by each and every board. Like in the case of UP, of course, we had a proactive board, but it's a board consisting of representatives, most of whom have their parochial or very certain interests. They represent certain interests that may not jibe, that may be difficult to reconcile with the interests of the other members of the board that are also representing their interests of their constituents. Like, we have faculty regents, we have student regents, we have admin staff regents. So each one has a particular interest to represent and to protect. So decisions in the board become diluted and always an exercise in compromise. In more progressive universities, I have seen in our region, well, one good example is Singapore. Of course, Singapore is no longer a developing country, but the universities there are governed by boards whose members are mostly from the private sector. We talk of close collaboration between public and private sectors. It's hard to achieve, when we continue to have universities that are acting like government entities. I thought, the concept of the university was developed in order to give it autonomy from two authorities. In the early days, from the church and then the state. But our public universities continued to be under the thumb of the state. One reform that I will really propose is a restructuring of the boards governing UP and other SUCs. There has to be a board that will really direct the strategy and govern the operation of the individual universities, and they should not be governed by uniform rules that Esther pointed out, but each one should be designed to suit the constituency that it is supposed to serve. So SUCs should cater to the needs of the regions where they are and work for the needs of the constituents in that region. But the other lesson I learned that in the Philippines, we only have one national university, which means that there is no competition to that university. Even in terms of budget, UP is getting a lion's share of the budget from the government. Even in terms of really exerting effort to better a competitor, because there is no competition, and they don't want to consider universities outside the Philippines as the real competitors of UP. So one
President
idea I want to
can you excuse me?
Propose is the setting up or strengthening of an existing university system like the Mindanao State University system and bring it to the level of what we know UP is now. Of course, again, they will be subject to the same practices as the existing organizations. The alternative that I'd like to propose and for this group to think about is the creation of a new university from scratch, particularly a Philippine University for Science and Technology, like what they did in Hong Kong. And like we will
Excuse
examine
me,
all other
President Pascual,
yeah.
can we stop now?
Okay.
Because you went over time. So
Okay, sorry.
yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
We can discuss more in the open forum. Let's
If I
give
can stay, yeah, it's okay.
yeah,
Thank you.
please save some of the good stuff for the open forum. Let's go to the next speaker, Tina. Go ahead.
Yes. Thank you very much, Lisa. Our next speaker is Dr. Emiliano Bolongaita, the head of the Carnegie Mellon University Australia. And he had this position since 2014 and concurrently a distinguished service professor of public policy and management. He was also the unit head of the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation Program at the Asian Development Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Emil Bolongaita. Dr. Emil?
Thank you very much, Christina, for that introduction. Like Dr. Pascual, I don't have some slides with me. I've prepared, however, notes as to guide my talk this tonight, and I was invited by President Mario to give my input on this topic from the perspective of the Philippine Innovation Act and the strategies to push S&T and R&D in the Philippines. As you all know, the Republic Act 11293 is a very important piece of legislation, as it expressly declares that the Philippine government should be innovative as it promotes innovation to make the economy more dynamic, sustainable, and inclusive. It is, of course, axiomatic that laws are not self-executing. No? If they were, all countries, the Philippines included, would have long ago legislated themselves to prosperity. Laws can be more or less well designed. A badly designed law effectively implemented can be just as terrible as a good law poorly implemented. Now, whether the Philippine Innovation Act is the former or the latter is not a question I will directly answer. However, as you may know, the act has been off to a slow start. It was passed in 2018, but the council had its first meeting only this month. So why has the council been off to such a slow start? Part of the reason is that the implementing rules and regulations of the act were only promulgated 2 years ago on February 7th. 2020. But the biggest factor, as you can guess, was the onset of the pandemic around that time that simply sucked the air out of many initiatives. With the pandemic now slowly getting into the government's rear view mirror, the National Innovation Council is happily starting to come to life. However, the design of the council that is mandated to drive the act could be said to contain the seeds of bureaucratic ineffectiveness and inefficiency. The council is composed of 25 members, 18 from government, namely the president as chair and 17 department secretaries, and 7 members from the private and NGO sectors. While it is laudable that the president is the chair and 17 secretaries are designated as members, the council is lopsidedly overweighted on government, which is, I think we can all agree, traditionally not designed to be an engine of innovation. For innovation disrupts and destabilizes, while traditional government prefers stability and status quo. Now, because the composition of the NIC is already defined by law, it does not make practical sense to restructure it so there is a more even composition between the public and the private sectors. But with the present structure, a critical question in my view is how can the council be more dynamic, entrepreneurial, speedy, in a word, innovative? It might be said that this would be the role of the Secretariat to the Council. However, I think this would be erroneous to assign such level of expectation to the Secretariat, which is staffed by government civil servants. While the Secretariat is staffed by highly qualified NEDA personnel, they do not have the experience, expertise, and authority to address and advise the Council. Now, there are a number of countries which we could draw lessons from in terms of innovation and S&T, such as Israel, Singapore, as has been mentioned, and Australia. In the interest of time, I'll focus my remarks on the Australian approach to state leadership in science and technology and innovation, which provides some interesting food for thought. Australia has a National Science and Technology Council, whose role is to provide advice to the Prime Minister and other ministers on science and technology issues. It has only 10 members. The Prime Minister is the chair, and the Minister of Industry, Science and Technology is the deputy chair. All other 8 members are not heads of departments or government officials, but rather leading scientists. The executive officer of the council, who manages its day-to-day affairs, is Australia's chief scientist, a role that you may be quite familiar with in a number of countries, such as, of course, Israel, and a few other countries as well. Now, the chief scientist is a role that the Philippines could consider adopting. It might be said that this is already a role occupied by the Secretary of the DOST, but that would, of course, be incorrect. The chief scientist of Australia and Israel and others is not a line function, but a staff function to the chief executive of government, whose mandate is to provide authoritative, independent advice, championing S&T that can encompass all departments of government. In the Philippines, the DOST secretary is a line department. Important as that is, the DOST secretary would be hard-pressed to be advising and be effective in doing so outside the lines of his or her department. Now, the chief scientists of Australia and in the countries that I've mentioned are preeminent figures in their communities with the requisite experience, expertise, and gravitas to speak truthfully to the chief executive and the senior officials of government. And the council that here in Australia that is chaired by this eminent individual is likewise full of similarly qualified eminent scientists who can amplify the council's voice. Now, another Australian role worth considering is the chief entrepreneur role, established in several states here in Australia, which is intended to provide high-level independent advice to the premiers and their cabinets on enabling entrepreneurship and innovation in their respective states. The chief entrepreneur chairs and is supported by an entrepreneurship advisory board who are all composed of business figures and entrepreneurs. It is instructive that there are no government officials in these boards. Now, the creation of these two roles and how they are structured and supported is a reflection here in Australia of the government's realization that when it comes to science and technology and entrepreneurship and innovation, the experience and expertise lie not in government, but in the scientific community and in the private sector. I would urge PAASE to consider recommending to the government that these two roles be created by the next Philippine administration, assisted respectively by a board composed of eminent scientists in the case of the chief scientist, and by a board of leading entrepreneurs and business figures in the case of the chief entrepreneur. These two offices would advise the president and the cabinet, as well as the National Innovation Council, which is really a sub-cabinet, in the drafting and implementation of the National Innovation Agenda and Strategy document that's stipulated in the Act, as well as in designing and executing strategic initiatives, such as those proposed by Professor Coelho, and similar to the initiatives that President Pascual did in UP. Now, with these two offices created in support of the National Innovation Council, the risk that this council will get bogged down by the weight of the functions of its high-ranking member officials will be mitigated. Significant time has been lost as it is since the act was passed. Now, in my view, having a chief scientist and a chief entrepreneur advising the council will ensure that the voice and wisdom of the scientific community and industry in the Philippines and abroad can be conveyed to policymakers and decision makers, thereby helping ensure that the government steers itself and its resources in the right direction in the most expeditious way possible. Let me end my remarks there, and I'll be happy to elaborate on the points I've made and on other issues you may want to raise in relation to my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emil, for sharing your experiences from Australia. And may I also remind our participants, for your comments and questions, we invite you to place these in our chat box. Dr. Lisa?
Yes, thank you, Emil. That was nice hearing about your Australian experience. Our next speaker is Dr. Teodoro Herbosa. He is a professor of emergency medicine and trauma surgery at UP-PGH, but he also served as the executive vice president of the UP system in 2017 to 2021. Dr. Herbosa, your turn.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. Let me share. I prepared slides. Are you seeing my slides? No.
Yes, only the panel of your computer, not yet the slides, Dr.
Really?
Teddy.
Okay,
Yeah, we see your desktop.
Yeah, it's I'll stop sharing again. Let me see. So what happened here?
Yeah, make sure you select the PowerPoint.
Share. Oh, it's not open. It closed. Sorry about that. Wait, let me just fix this. There you go. Okay, and share. My job has been made easier by President Pascual, because as I was doing my presentation, I discovered that most of the work was actually done by Giselle and Pascual during the previous administration. So I'll give you an idea of how UP converted into some sort of a research university. And I'll put the perspective of my college, which is the College of Medicine, and the health campus, which is UP Manila. So this is our motto, UP is honor and excellence, but it also looks at the moral core of compassion. And if you look at our strategic plan as we entered into the new administration after President Pascual, it was all about research, create, conserve, communicate new knowledge, promote publications, incentivize publications, connect to the public, that's the science be promoted to the public, and beef up research and development. And the UP has had a long tradition of this. And it was the passing of the Republic Act, the UP Charter, which is 9500, which allowed us to actually become really the national university, the single recognized national university. All the rest are called state universities. And then we're actually equivalent to about 10 state universities, because we have 8 constituent universities, something like the University of California, with all the different campuses, with each one having a chancellor. So we're all over the Philippines. I think the campus number keeps increasing. If I'm not mistaken, it's now 23, if I will include the new Clark City and even other areas that are being increased. We have about 58,000 students, about 6,000 faculty. You can see those with the doctorate degree, the master's degree, etc. And the UP has a grand tradition of really helping national government evolve. We produced 7 of the 15 presidents of the country, 13 of the chief justices, of 24 chief justices, 7 of 15 national artists, 13 of 24 designated national scientists. So I think the investments in UP are, giving a payback for the national government. And we've actually also ranked very well in the different university rankings. Now, when we came in, we looked at the strategic plan of how to really push the university into a global university. And you go to the lowest level, and it's actually all 3 things that we wanted to create. Knowledge creation, which is basically research, strengthen the academic programs, enhance the staff by creating more PhDs, and enhance research, publications, and creative works. And that's balanced with the public service, being able to produce competent ethical leaders that will enhance UP's public service program, and that's really a culture that is in UP and contribute to national development, very similar to the goals of what we here in PAASE are trying to do in trying to create science. We've also, through the work of President Pascual, pushed for internationalization. Una, there was a big debate and a lot of people said, no, the UP should only be for national endeavors and not worry about international. But President Pascual pushed this, and I'm very glad he did this, because now we have UP-CIFAL, which is a UN designated office. It's a research think tank, and we're actually doing lots of projects in local governance, in road safety, alcohol, and many other things, and migration. But I'll show you some of the examples that I think our colleagues in America and the other parts of the world should look at. Newly created was the UP Resilience Institute. And this is close to me because my field of study is actually disaster medicine, and Resilience Institute is really that particular unit that actually looks at the research part of disasters. And the Philippines really is part of that. And this also includes climate change as well. So this is the crossover of DRR, disaster risk reduction, and climate change adaptation. At UP Manila, where I am, we actually have the National Institutes of Health. And this used to be the old building of the NSDB, National Science and Development Building, and it's been converted to the NIH. Now we will have a new building, a 10-story building that was funded in 2014. I think I was Undersecretary of Health when that was actually funded. So the interesting thing is this is our core of why UP Manila, as a health research hub, has become a leader in terms of development. So the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, have about 15 institutes. And if you're in an institute, we even have research faculty in the institute. That means you're faculty, you're a research professor. All you do is actually publish a minimum of, I think, 4 papers a year. You have to be able to publish 4 to maintain that status. I think the regular faculty just gets about 1 or 2 papers per year as a minimum. The other thing I'd like to talk about here is the fact that actually, before I was distracted to administrative work in terms of the Department of Health as Undersecretary and then Executive Vice President, I actually set up what's called a study group. Study groups are multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary topics of research. And the one I put up is the Health Emergencies and Disaster Study Group, or HED. And it was supposed to be a collaborating center of the WHO, but eventually I was offered, I was a visiting professor in the University of Bangsaan, Malaysia. So I left it to my graduate, Dr. Gundran. Actually, it's continued to get grants, but he was unable to build it into another institute. So the idea was actually to build it in institute. So you become a study group first, and then eventually it evolves. If you become sustainable, you can build and propose an institute, which has to be approved by the Board of Regents and passed on by the Chancellor. So this is how the the different topics in health are actually being looked at by specific people who actually look at their areas of study. We usually get our own grants to be able to push those interests that each of the faculty are able to do. This was mentioned by President Pascual. This is the spanking new Philippine Genome Center, which has been vital in our fight against COVID-19 as it did the genomic surveillance. I remember visiting the genetic center in France together with Chancellor Menchit, and the head of our National Institutes of Health nudged me. They said, EVP Ted, our genome sequencer is more modern than this one. So we actually got the Mercedes brand of genome sequencer. And I think this has been a vital contribution. It wasn't predicted to be used for a pandemic, but eventually it gave its use. And the WHO actually approached me and was talking to me when I was an EVP to make it a center of excellence for the region, for ASEAN, so that the other countries would actually help learn from our genomic center. So this is the organizational chart of the genomic center. It's got the research and development side and its core facilities of genome sequencing. It's actually a very expensive center. So the investments that were put by President Pascual there, and I'm very glad that the national government funded it, because as you know, genomics as a science in healthcare is really, spearheading many of the developments, whether it was cancer or infectious disease. So you can see already the government has gotten its investment back in terms of building this very big infrastructure. The other thing that I saw when I was executive vice president in Diliman, of course, they invited me to give lectures at the Institute of Biology, which was my home pre-med degree. And I was surprised because when I gave a talk on disasters, I asked the first question, how many of you plan to go to medicine? And there was like 2, 3, or I think less than 5 people that raised their hand. I said, oh, so that means most of you are going to PhD. And I saw them nodding their heads. So it seems that the building of the center, creates the imagination of our students, that when they start to work in modern labs, in what we call sandboxes, they are inspired. They are inspired to actually continue to, they envision themselves in a career working in a, nice lab as a PhD in molecular biology or genetics. So this is all part of what President Pascual mentioned that they got funding for. They built what is called the National Science Complex in UP Diliman. And below is like a grand picture of the central area. The Genome Center is somewhere nearby, but this is the Institute of Molecular Biology building, the Institute of Biology, Chemistry, etc. Now, what's important is to compete in the global universities, we need to put out publications, and you can see based on the publications, you can see the different universities: Diliman, Manila, Los Baños. I think there's also Visayas. Those are all university of the Philippines, but of course we call them different universities. But if you add all the total of the national university, malayo talaga siya because it's really producing a lot of paper. This is another rating system, and the University of the Philippines, Diliman, Los Baños, Manila are also there. Visayas is also in the top 10 in the production. This is the one that got me when in 2020. It's very interesting that the National Institutes of Health really has contributed a lot. There's actually 2, the National Institutes of Health and the Philippine General Hospital. So we produce a lot of clinical research as well as basic research. And those 2 combined put us high up because we studied diseases and conditions that seem to be of interest of other researchers. So our rankings for the clinical, preclinical health subjects UP citation score of 91.9. It is higher than the scores of the 3 top-ranked universities in this ranking, World University ranking, Oxford, Harvard, and Cambridge. And I was trying to think about this, and I said, must be the tropical diseases that we have, because this must be of interest to the other people in the other universities. So they were citing the work of our people on problems that we needed to solve, different from theirs, but looked like because of our access to these diseases are able to actually become cited. This is Joe Coelho's discussion of the frameworks of how to build this actual discussion tonight. And it's really, I agree with it. It's not that simple because the Philippine governance is really very complex. Having been an undersecretary in the Department of Health, I could see the complexity of just engaging the private sector. There is no culture of public-private partnerships. I was head of the PPP unit of the Department of Health, and it was vehemently opposed by the leftists because they wanted a socialized form of governance. So be careful when you do this. My only caution is you will meet opposition from left-leaning people who think that the private sector, quote unquote, in their words, the capitalist, will destroy the freedom, the academic freedom of a university. I'm somewhere in the middle. I think I'm a moderate, and I think it's not going to happen. The progress in research cannot happen without the private sector and industry, and I do believe it should be the middle ground, and there should be some level of autonomy. Yet the private sector shouldn't pirate our academe and researchers out of it. The other thing I'd like to really talk about is what we do in the health sector, why we produce that many. And the NIH, together with the Department of Science and Technology, leads on this because we have what's called the National Unified Health Research Agenda. And we meet on this and we agree on where the topics are. So there's a process on how we get the NURA, we call it the National Unified Health Research Agenda. So we agree together with the Department of Health, which puts money into research, the OST, which puts money in research, CHED, and of course the UP Manila NIH, and we help develop and there's a process to do that. The process is inclusive, it's realistic, and it's collaborative. And that's why I think our researchers are well cited because of the output and the focus of the health sector. So this is like the way we do the discussion. You can download the document, just look for Google the National Unified Health Research Agenda, and you will be able to download this document. But this is how it's done. We do 17 regional situational reports of the different regions in the Philippines, and they produce technical reports, and they put regional context and a local context. I actually attend some of these meetings, and there are consultations in what we call health research councils that are in the different regions. In Metro Manila, it's the National Institutes of Health that lead it. In other areas, it's a state university that leads it, like the MSU or the Western Visayas State University. And there are the Philippine National Health Research System, that's how we call it. So that system exists, and that's where all our health researchers are actually put in. It's a combination and collaboration of CHED, the UP Manila NIH, 10 Department of Science and Technology research areas, and 22 Department of Health research agendas. And we collaborate, and all the national stakeholders attend meetings, and this is pushed really by the Philippine Council for Health Research and Development. So these are the top research agenda for this particular plan. Number one is responsive health system. So finding ways to actually make sure that the health systems implemented in the Philippines will actually improve. And much of the work here is actually funded. I'm actually doing a grant for road safety. So trying to improve road safety in the Philippines as well. Also have another project with the disaster, which is really I'll show it later, the Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Simulation Center in Health. And then the other one is research to enhance and extend healthy lives, holistic approaches to health and wellness, health resiliency, global competitiveness and innovation, part of what we're talking, and research in equity and health. We're implementing the Universal Healthcare Law, which is really the answer to health inequity, and we're trying to look for solutions through proper research and the evidence-based policies that can be developed through good research. The other thing I'd like to describe to you was mentioned by President Pascual. This is the TTBDO, the Technology Transfer and Business Development Office, and it's system-wide. And what's interesting is that before, the scientists would have a patent or discover something, they wouldn't know how to establish that patent. This is the office that actually guides them to all the intellectual property that they will be able to. And there are many successes also, and some failures as well, because of difficulties in terms of this process. So there are lawyers that help us with the IP part. So these are the things that we do. I don't have to go to the detail. You can go to the website. The other thing that I saw when I was an executive vice president was this place called Upscale. And it got me interested because a group of Singaporean academics visited us, and they showed this Upscale Innovation Hub. So it's for startups. So what happens is we have researchers that actually put in their studies in this particular area and unit, and they are developed and coached and mentored and taught and eventually are spun off. And this was also described to you by President Roscoe. So this happens and these are replicated. So that one, the hub I showed you, was in Diliman. Of course, we have several research centers, and we have specific areas of expertise, like Manila is health, Los Baños is agriculture. So these are some of their centers, and we don't have to go through all of them. This was also mentioned by President Pascual, the Emerging Interdisciplinary Research, or the EIDR. So this forced me to work with people from social science, from engineering in my field of medicine. And I am a recipient of a grant for road safety study. And we have 4 streams of that. I even partnered with a mathematician, the current Philippine statistician, Dean Mapa. So the idea was to have studies of multidisciplinary. I think I have to thank Giselle for this grant, because unfortunately I had to step down because I was also the executive vice president that would sign a grant to me. So I had to give it to the next guy, Rick Sigua, to be able to run our project. So the other one we did is really the Balik PhD recruitment program, and we actually hired many PhDs to actually come back and actually help run, like the Philippine Genome Center. Initially had a PhD from UK, but he passed away from illness. So this continues. I do hope some of those in the hall would actually think seriously of doing either Balik PhD, or now with the ease of Zoom and virtual meetings, I think we can do this. This is for the Creative Works research grant. We also have a documentation of all of this being given by the university. This is on our website. And this is the incentive for publications award. So if you're able to publish in a peer-reviewed journal, the university pays you extra money. So it's an award. So UP Manila, as you can see from the designation, and it's the position of the National Institutes of Health, is already there as a research university in the health sector, and it's been leading. And we've been trying to collaborate with the rest of the country, trying to really help out develop all the different illnesses. So there's the newborn screening program, there's hearing loss, and there's many others, all the different interesting products that lead to very high levels of citation. So like medicinal plants, the Lagundi was actually discovered there, Sambong, Chaanggubat, which are now pharmaceutical and commercial. And then in disaster, psychosocial health as well, post-disasters, hepatitis immunization, hepatitis B, was also all developed in NIH. Lastly, I'd like to talk about this NICER. This is a project of the OST, but we're also a recipient of this niche centers for regions for R&D. And what we're running is really the disaster risk reduction and management in health. This is a simulation center and training center for health professionals and local government officials. When we passed the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Act, each local government was supposed to put up a disaster risk reduction and management office, but they didn't have the simulation, the training center that I saw when I trained abroad. So this grant actually puts that up. So we have the Emergo Train, we have computer simulations, and we continue to develop this. We will have a whole floor in the new NIH building specifically for this disaster simulation center, which is very appropriate for the Philippines in the terms of. Finally, I think the most important part of what has made NIH very successful is, like, for example, when I got my EIDR grant, I sent we just let an office in the NIH run it. So it's called the Research Grants Administration Office, or ARGAO for short. It's completely staffed with employed people who help us with the administrative, financial, and all the etc. part that the scientist doesn't want to do. Because what happens is, I think the initial EIDR grant, Giselle knows, some of the scientists got COA citation. So that's very problematic, when you're just doing research and you have to follow all the rules of government in terms of that. So in summary, you can see that the UP system has really led the way in terms of research and knowledge creation in the Philippines, in the setting that we have. Despite all the difficulties described by President Esther, we are able to move forward. We have the National Unified Health Research Agenda. I do hope that the other councils for research, we have a PICARI, which is the engineering. We have a PICARD, which is the agriculture. So this is the PCHRD, or the Philippine Council for Health Research and Development. Maybe we could have something that's transdisciplinary and all, like nutrition should have studies in agriculture, engineering, and medicine. Then I talked about the TTVDO, all the different campuses that are putting up even genome centers. So by the way, the Philippine Genome Center also has genome centers in Visayas and Mindanao. So it's actually a nationwide chain of genomic studies. And we lent the first PCR machines to our different regions, actually, so that we could test COVID-19, which those units actually had already. Talked about the EIDR project, Emerging Interdisciplinary Research, Balik PhD, Creative Works Research Grant, Incentive Productivity Awards, the NICER project, and the ARGAO. So with that, thank you very much. I do hope everybody got educated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ted. It's very encouraging to see the progress made, especially with the initiatives with the NIH in UP Manila. I don't see Dr. Tirso Ronquillo in the audience. I don't know what happened, but he couldn't make it. So we allowed more time to our speakers. So now let's open the floor for question and answers. If you have a question, raise your hand. I'll change to gallery view so I can see.
We have some comments in the chat box, Lisa. I think Ino
Go
Lensigan,
ahead.
would you like to share your comments? I think he commented on President Pascual's talk. Yes, Ino, go ahead.
Okay, good evening, good morning to all. Okay, I would like to make a comment on what President Pascual mentioned about, cultivating town-gown partnership, particularly in the regions where the higher education institutions, or particularly the state colleges and universities in the region, would be collaborating actively with the local government units. In particular, for example, as mentioned by Dr. Herbosa, UPRI has been helping a number of local government units in the regions in updating their local climate change action plan, and also the RRMP plans and other plans mandated by government. And so I suppose now that LGUs will be expected to receive more money out of the Mandanas Garcia ruling, I think it's also an opportunity for state colleges and universities to really explore active collaboration with the LGUs. We hope PAASE will play an important role along that line. Thank you.
Thank you, Ino. Would you like to comment on that, President Pascual?
Agree.
I comment on what? The comment of Professor
For
Lancia.
Ino. Yes.
Yeah. Well, with respect to the LGU's closer collaboration with the SUCs in their region, I think that should be the way to go, and that should be encouraged. In fact, the collaboration should go beyond just at the level of education, but more on R&D. Each region has a particular specialization of farm produce. You know, some are coconut regions, some are rice regions, some are aquatic type regions like the what do you call this, seaweeds. So the SUCs in those regions should pay particular attention. In one graduation speech I made in Partido State University in Bicol, I encouraged this university to take care of creating value-added innovations to the products of Bicol, like pili nuts, abaca is still an important product, and coconut, of course. In other countries, universities are assigned particular industries to take care of. I hope in planning the activities of SUCs that they be given assignments, and the funding should be directed to the assigned work. Like there should be a number of SUCs working on coconut, because coconut is, you know, a product with universal uses, and there's a lot of innovation work waiting to be done so that we can increase the value addition on the product. Right now, we're just, well, we started with just exporting copra. Now we're exporting coconut water, but there are many other things that can come out of coconut. Same with abaca, same with seaweeds. There should be an assigned SUC for each of these industries. One, depending on how extensive, if it's narrow and extensive, if it's extensive, there should be more universities assigned. What I did when I was in UP was to set up an extension campus of UP Los Baños, for example, in Panabo, so that it can assist the planters of banana and pineapple in Mindanao, you know, take care of diseases that affect their crops. Also, I don't know the status now. I started supposedly a campus in Alabang, which is very near to many of the industrial estates. This was the development of this campus when I was there was being led by the College of Engineering, and it's supposed to work closely with the companies located in the industrial estates to help them with their R&D requirements. UP Mindanao, for example, I funded so that it can specialize in taking care of the mangrove areas in Mindanao. I think this is the kind of arrangements that we should have. You know, there is this aspiration of many universities to be comprehensive. I kept on emphasizing in the UP system that each of the constituent universities should specialize and be excellent in their area of specialization. So it's no longer just UP Diliman that's considered the excellent unit of the UP system, but each and every unit in the UP system should be excellent in the area that they have chosen, or that their circumstances dictated them to specialize on.
All right. Thank you, President Pascual. Yes, Lisa, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Tirso Ronquillo. He just joined. So if you don't mind, let's give him a chance to have his 10 minutes worth of talk. This is Dr. Tirso Ronquillo. He's an electronics engineer and president of Batangas State University, also the president of the Philippine Association State Colleges state universities and colleges, or also known as PASUC. So Dr. Ronquillo, you have the floor.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank Dr. Giselle for inviting me to share what we are doing at Batangas State University. And of course, to other panelists, to other speakers. I saw some familiar faces. Pardon me, Dr. Giselle, I just entered. Actually, I forgot this. And thank you for prompting me. No, I saw President Pascual, good afternoon, President. I saw Dr. Esther Garcia and all others. I, of course, excited to join you. In fact, when I received invitation from Dr. Giselle, I right away said yes. Batangas State University, as you may already know, is one of the 114 state universities in the country. And recently, we expanded our program specifically on engineering, science, and technology, which I think the fields espoused by PAASE. Currently, Batangas State University is 46 in program. We are, I think, records. We are the largest engineering schools in the country today in terms of enrollment and in terms of programs offered in engineering. We are very happy to share that recently, the Batangas State University Knowledge, Innovation, Science and Technology Park was proclaimed by no less than the
Internet connection.
as registered by
Hi, President Tirso.
Bad connection.
You may want to close your camera so there'll be a broader bandwidth. You're coming in a bit choppy.
Okay. I hope I am audible now.
Yes.
A bit, yes.
Okay, so recently, as I was discussing, Batangas State University had its KST Park proclaimed by the president, and it is the first of its kind. And PESA registered it, and we can invite locators now, which I think a good place for our university students, university faculty, to do research with the industry. This is also established in the, I don't know if I can still share my screen. Am I allowed to share my screen?
Yes, you are. You are a co-host.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if you are seeing my screen.
Yes, you are seeing it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you. So just a snapshot of what we are doing at Batangas State University. This is what I was discussing, the establishment or the proclamation of the Knowledge, Innovation, Science and Technology Park. This is an expanded information technology park as categorized by PESA. Now, at Batangas State University, we are glad that we are at the heart of Calabarzon. We are one of the provinces in Calabarzon, and that's why we have this aggressiveness really to offer new programs and even to offer emerging programs in engineering, science, and technology, and at the same time apply for some technology park like this. Our KISS Park includes the following services: startup incubation, technology support and product development, financial support from partner banks, MSMEs, angel investors, venture capitalists, patent services, in-house spaces for locators. Our curriculum in engineering we revised to include technopreneurship. Before, technopreneurship is simply an elective, but in our we made technopreneurship a mandated course. It's really a course in the engineering courses, in technology courses, and in informatics courses. All of them are required to take technopreneurships. Our STEER Hub, we are glad to share that this STEER Hub, STEER is an acronym, STEER, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Environment Research Hub. It is recognized by the Regional Development Council of Calabarzon as the Calabarzon Center for Science, Technology, and Engineering Research. This is currently a 5-story research facility, but as we transition to the full development or full operation of our technopark, this serves as interim facility. The first 2 floors, only 2 floors are 2 levels are devoted to research and development. We have Manufacturing Research Center, we have Material Science and Calibration Center, in this technology center. We also have a GIS Applications Development Center and AI Applications Development Center. So our students are doing research in this center. At the same time, this is one thing we leverage on our locators. They are allowed, or we allow them to use our facilities. In fact, one of the locators access our researchers by way of making their products simulated in our laboratories. Our engineers and our researchers simulated GLAC, one of the company that is Pythos company in Cavite, where their R&D is being done in this STEER Hub, while the R&D is being done in this STEER Hub. Our students and faculty are doing or creating this design in this STEER Hub. Now, these are the research centers that I was mentioning. This Manufacturing Research Center, or Fab Lab, is one of the research centers supported by DTI, the Department of Trade and Industry. We have 3D printers, laser cutters and engravers, and all equipment that are needed in manufacturing some prototypes that can be mass produced by the industry. We have that in our STEER Hub. This Kiss Park Center, which is also hosted in our STEER Hub, is in partnership with PESA, the bus station supporting. Is a pioneering project of PESA, and currently we are the only state university with KAST. Batangas State University is certified by PESA as owner-developer of this technology park. We are not yet operating fully. We are at the interim facility. This is STEER Hub. The 5-level facility, 2 levels of which are devoted for research facility. The 3 levels are now being occupied or ready to be occupied by the locators. We have the partnership with the Indian Embassy to the Philippines. In fact, a number of possible prospective locators already visited our facility, and they are willing and actually exploring how they can be hosted in our facility, the FinTech, the Agritech, the EduTech, and we are actually now having limited space. In fact, they are wanting for more space. And what is interesting in these research laboratories, our students, and the beauty of a university-based technology park is the locators can access. We can leverage on the human resource and the physical resources available in our STEER Hub. And one good thing, even the research or the thesis of the students can do that with our in this STEER Hub. Now, also, Batangas State University is recognized by DTI and DOST as their RICS program, the RRIC, the Regional Inclusive Innovation Center. We are the lead academic partner of DTI in the RICS program in partnership with USAID Stride. And our main responsibility is to be the convener, at the same time the venue of the possible R&D among the innovation actors in the region. And Batangas State University recently acquired, or were able to be granted by DOST and CHED in terms of our technopreneurship program. We supported other HCI, whether private or state, in Southern Tagalog, for them to be hosted in our TBI. In our term, we call it Center for Technopreneurship and Innovation. That Center for Technopreneurship and Innovation supports startups. We are funding startup. We are giving support to our students at the startup phase and even in the acceleration phase. We propose to our board, and our board of regents approve the funding support even to our local startup. And that is one inspiration to our technopreneurship students. So we really are putting more programs in our KST and our STEER Hub. Hopefully, because of the pandemic, we were not able to get as many as possible locators. But as we open up now, we are starting to contact more locators from even in Calabarzon, in Manila, in Cavite, in Laguna, and these partners from India and even from other parts in Taiwan are willing to locate in our facility in the STEER Hub. So currently, even our engineering programs were expanded. Aerospace engineering, biomedical engineering, automotive operation, energy, among others. We offer science. And that is our hope, really, to facilitate R&D of these engineering programs in our KST and our STEER Hub. So these are the simple sharing of the development that we are doing at Batangas State University. Thank you very much. I'm ready to answer some of your questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ronquillo. It's very nice to see all these developments with Batangas State University and the KIST Park coming up. We have a lot of people lined up to ask their questions now. Let me start with Dr. Joel Coelho. Joel?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Lisa. First, I want to thank President Tirso. Really, thank you for your forward-looking leadership in pushing the envelope of innovation with public-private academic partnership. That's really commendable. Thank you. My question, though, is directed more toward Ted as well as Emil, because they're the ones who raised this up. But all the discussants, please feel free to give your take. There seems to be this thing that I'm sensing in the Philippines about this reluctance on the part of certain universities, and UP definitely is one of them, to partner with the private industry. And Ted, with your comment, it really shed light on this matter. But I think it's important for us to bring this to the light, because otherwise it will always be an undercurrent, particularly with UP, and it's not healthy that it's there. But there's this tug of war between socialism and capitalism. And in a way, I'm sympathetic to that, because the Philippines has a long history of inequality and a gap between the haves and the have-nots. So I understand where that's coming from. On the other hand, the government, the national government, the national university have the responsibility to develop the country and to create jobs for Filipinos and develop its science and technology innovation ecosystem. So that definitely has to be addressed, needs to be balanced. So my question is, and Emil, you pointed out that in Australia, the minister has a National Innovation Council advisory that's headed by the Prime Minister, and then the vice chair, I suppose, is the chair of the Ministry of Trade and Industry, which echoes, what they have in Singapore, where they have this A-STAR, the Agency for Science, Technology and Research Board, which is under the Ministry of Trade and Industry. I'm not proposing that in the Philippines. I'm just pointing out the value of these societies in terms of the importance of trade and industry and commercialization relative to science and technology. And Ted, of course, you brought up this matter of this seeming conflict between capitalism and socialism. So my question is, how do we address this in the Philippines? How can the private sector and the academic branch be made to work together harmoniously for the common cause of national development, which is really essential because the Philippines cannot afford to not have one or the other. They need both. The Philippines needs both. Comments,
Thank
please.
you for noticing that, Joel, because I think this is the stumbling block that is, this is my assessment. That's why I mentioned it in this meeting, is that I feel it has been the stumbling block of true progress in R&D, in science and development. When you have a mentality that capitalism is bad, and what we should do is serve the bayan, serve the people, and through your research and development. And I know that because I'm in healthcare, I'm in medicine. Nothing will progress if we don't talk to the pharma industry, the equipment company, and everything. So it's got to be a balance. But we have scientists in the Philippines who have very socialist ideas, and we have scientists who leave UP because they don't want this socialist ideals and would want to work with private sector. So where do we go there? So even when I was head of the public-private partnership unit at the Department of Health, they opposed the modern hospitals that I wanted to build with the public-private partnership, and I feel really bad for that because we were supposed to have a new hospital, 700-bed hospital for orthopedics and spine, and it was opposed. It was the same company that built the Mactan Airport, and it was already awarded. The company just said, no, we don't want to do that. There's so much trouble with the left-leaning, because their concept was they will lose jobs. The private sector will now take over, give them little jobs, and the profit will go to the capitalist. And so progress doesn't happen. Unlike Singapore. Singapore run the state like a capitalist corporation, and they invested they hired the best people from all over the world, brought them to Singapore. They built their center, trained their people, and now they're leading in science, innovation, and technology. And now they're even going into the arts, which is our field. So I really believe strongly about this. And I think if we don't fix this major philosophical divide or thinking, I think we will always be like a dog wagging its tail, running around and catching its tail. I think this balance of the private, especially as a middle income country now, I think the only way to go forward is to use exactly what was described. We were the first in the Philippines, in UP, to establish a techno hub, the Ayala Techno Hub. Alam mo, I felt very bad because I was sending socialist faculty abroad for their PhD using money we got from that UP Techno Hub grant. So if only I could just write in the your PhD degree is being funded by something you opposed and rallied in the streets that you were against to, but it's all the income of the university that was supposed to be used for faculty development, for sending people to masters and PhD to top universities that they got accepted into, was taken from this public-private partnership with Ayala. Now there are two, the town center. But there are still people who think that they shouldn't have been used in the university. They shouldn't have been using UP land. So this to me is a schizophrenia that we need to fix especially in the national university. I think I have less of a problem in the health sciences, and that's why you saw the leapfrogs of development in science, because the doctors understand the system that we need to collaborate with the capitalists and with industry. If we don't do that, you'll never get the vaccines out. You'll never get the medicines out. You'll never get the equipment out. So my goal is that eventually universal healthcare should be that peg where we can actually be able to develop the health system and make it cheaper for the Filipino people. The same ideals the socialists want. They want for the people less corruption. Okay, so healthcare is expensive because everything is imported. I import the medicines, I import the equipment, I import even the stuff I wear. So if I can produce them with engineers and local technology people, healthcare should become cheaper and should be accessible to everyone. So that's where I'm coming from, and that's why I'm mentioning this, because any talk of R&D won't move forward if we don't get the private sector in. And you clearly stated it in your diagrams yesterday, with all the involvement of industry. That is very clear to my mind. In fact, that National Science Complex of UP, that is beside a what do we call it, Gisela? It's supposed to have
the S&T part. Correction.
The Science and Technology Park, very similar to what Tirso is building. That should have been a locator for that,
So,
for
Ed,
the private sector.
To clarify, the National Science Complex is the result of a PASA campaign in 2006. Okay, and during President Pascual's time, we tried to get that technopark to become R&D PESA zone. But then the deans of science and engineering in UP Diliman said that if we did that and got our two colleges involved, that would be commercialization of UP.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the word. That's the bad word that's being used.
Ted, thank you.
Bad word.
Dr. Emil
Ted, thank you.
give his
Can we just hear from Emil,
response?
please?
Yeah, Dr. Emil.
Thank you very much. I think that if I can just start by saying that I think there is no question about the talent of Filipinos in science and technology and the capabilities of our entrepreneurs, no? Because we can create world-class companies. So there's no question about that. But yet we still lag, as we all know, in terms of innovation and competitiveness, and the effort that we currently have in place, the framework that that's articulated in the Philippine Innovation Act, to be spearheaded by the National Innovation Council, is an effort that can be improved and should be improved, because it is arguably inadequate, no? And so that's really the context for, or the gist of my remarks. And I think the experience that I've referred to in Australia is instructive in a number of ways. Now, look, Australia has a very different culture here, no? It's a frontier mentality. The people who started this country were ex-convicts. They had to make do with the challenging environment of this place, and the entrepreneurialism in government is actually quite palpable, in my view. Look, they even disrupted their higher education sector. They invited Carnegie Mellon to set up shop. They amended their Higher Education Act in 2002 to open up the education space for foreign competition, and they incentivized international universities to set up in Australia, and Carnegie Mellon was the first to do so. And CMU is a very entrepreneurial university, as some of you may know. Commercialization is definitely not a bad word with us. So we are in, we have a campus in Rwanda, in Qatar, and now am I suggesting that for the Philippines? I'm not saying that as a recommendation, only illustrating that as an example of the kinds of ideas that can come if you have a very entrepreneurial approach, and so out of the box ideas will surface, like the idea of establishing opening up the education sector to international universities was something that was suggested by an entrepreneur here, you know, and managed to convince the foreign minister and the premier that this was worth doing to inject dynamism in the higher education space so they can be more commercially oriented, like some international universities. And so I think that there is an opportunity presented by the Philippine Innovation Act that needs to be seized better. So I hope that the few ideas that I mentioned can complement the other good ideas that have been shared in this forum and in yesterday's forum. So
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Emil. We have hands raised by Dr. Al. Yes, go ahead, Dr. Al, and then Dr. Mario.
Okay. Well, thank you, Christina. Yeah, this is a comment that I wanted to address, actually, what you've raised. The lack of communication between industry and academia has been outlined, actually, in the US Aid Stride White Paper of 2014. And that's specifically what I've been working for the last 8 years in the Philippines, to increase that industry-academe collaboration. And one of the projects that we did in 2015 is the formation of the Philippine Government University Industry Research Roundtable. It's a 25-year-old organization in the US, sponsored by the National Academy of Engineering and the National Academy of Science, that's actually made exactly to ask industry in their specific areas of expertise to meet the scientists in the university and in government. NIH and NSF are still part of that collaboration, and they meet yearly and regionally to chart out the path for specific areas of technology, like the Human Genome Project, nanotechnology, biotechnology. We brought that here in the Philippines in 2015, and we tried to bring in industry. My father-in-law was chairman of Makati Business Club at that time. I made the rounds with all the CEOs in the country. Unfortunately, we had Ed Chua, who's now the chairman of Makati Business Club, has been very supportive of the idea. But 4 years hence, we still are grappling. So we have a unique opportunity now with President Pascual, who's now the MAP president. Congratulations, by the way, Paep, for making the management cessation of the Philippines presidency for the year. I think it might be worth revisiting because it still is an issue right now, the distrust. I mean, yesterday it came up from the faculty internship. We did that project also in US Aid Stride in 2014, bringing in faculty, PhDs to industry. That's what Joey Ochabe was mentioning yesterday. We did 6 of those professors in 2014, 2015. But still, it didn't become sustainable because we ran out of industry who wants to take them in. And we also ran out of professors who are more open to being able to be collaborative with industry. We had a lot of these models, guys. I mean, if you already care to ask exactly what has been done, I mean, I hope Richard, procurement, we had a discussion with UPLB this morning about it, but I'm not going to touch that part. But I really wanted to take the opportunity with President Pascual in the audience today. Is it possible, President Pascual, that we convene again the government university industry research roundtable with the participation of MAP in this case? I did ask your past president, Lisa Mantaring, and she told me specifically, Al, you have to create a value proposition for each of my members for them to show up in such a forum. Kindly comment on that one if it's still true, or maybe your being president will likely to make that happen. Hopefully, by opening this communication between university industry, it will remove the distrust that Ted is talking about on the socialistic side. President Pascual, please. Thank you.
Thank you, all. So maybe we could give the floor first to President Pascual, if that's okay. Dr. Mario. Thank you. President Pascual.
Thank you. Actually, Al, we have started a year earlier in promoting industry academe collaboration. Last year, I was also a member of the board of MAP and the governor in charge of this effort to support AIM in a program that it was running for SUCs. And I was one of the opening lecturers in the module of university governance. And that was followed towards the end of the program with a series of dialogues between SUC presidents and senior officials on one hand, and representatives of business and private sector on the other. And we identified where collaboration is possible. And we were doing it in the context of promoting the digital technology, which is really an area where there is an opportunity for the Philippines to leapfrog in technology advancement, because it doesn't require much scientific equipment, to achieve much in the digital space. Remember, I don't know whether you caught what I said earlier. It's a long revolution is needed sometimes, because evolution takes a long time. Look at what happened when we got disrupted by COVID-19. The disruption has accelerated many of the things we were trying to implement before, like digital transformation. In UP, I started digital transformation in 2011. Very strong resistance, especially so when I adopted an existing integrated software, which was available at a very cheap price from an American developer. And for all you know, made use of Filipino programmers, to prepare those programs. But anyway, there was strong resistance, and they were even sabotaging through DDS, DDS, the
denial of service.
They attack overloading of the system through bots that continue to access the site. And it failed, in Los Baños. I had it investigated by the NBI, and it was unequivocally established that there was sabotage.
Really?
Those who were resisting the implementation of the student academic information system, I suspect, were behind the sabotage. This was I had a report from NBI saying that the failure of that the access to the system was because of DDS. Anyway, I was suggesting that the way to disrupt the system is one way to open up, as Al is saying, was it Al? Open the educational sector to entry of foreign universities. Malaysia did it because they could not implement many things in University of Malaysia, the National University. Then they created a joint venture between University of Malaya and a Scottish university. And they were able to charge multiple times tuition, and they made use of the same faculty of the University of Malaysia to teach in the joint venture and pay them a commercial rate, and they were happy. But anyway, as I said before, it's hard to change mindset. As in 2016, 5 years into my term, a professor in UP published a paper saying Pascual has shown his true persuasions, or where his true persuasions lie, in intensifying commercialization, and more worryingly, the erosion of liberal and philosophical ideals of university education. This is a timely call to revive principled theoretical jousts in the tradition of the 1950s and the 1970s. That's how backward the thinking is. They are longing for those years, okay, of liberal education. You know, the university systems have moved on. You know, they're now serving the needs of the economy to support progress, and that should be what we should be doing. That's why I hinted, in fact, I said it explicitly, that if we cannot quickly come up with a university from among the existing ones to compete with UP, we might as well establish a new one, but focus on science and technology, like what Hong Kong did, and demonstrate, you know, what difference it could make, and let those who are still harboring the old views see the difference, and the difference will definitely change their view of things. You know? And I hope the scientists and engineers who are members of PAASE and are still abroad would constitute the initial team that will, you know, populate the faculty of this new university. In China, they brought in their Chinese expats who were studying in the US when I was there, you know. And they put up new universities, you know, around this returning expatriate Chinese. That's the way to go. We are the only country in ASEAN, major country in ASEAN, where there's only one national university. Indonesia has UI, University Indonesia, and Bandung Technology University. Singapore has National University of Singapore and Nanyang Technological University. Thailand has 4 or 5 national universities: Chulalongkorn, Mahidol, Thammasat, etc. Malaysia has a number of national universities aside from University Malaya. Vietnam, a country that's progressing very fast, has 2 national universities: National University of Vietnam, Hanoi, National University of Vietnam, Saigon. I think we need to see how this competitive pressure, this is competition by benchmarking. It's not really head-on competition we're talking about. It's demonstrational, so that there could be a basis for benchmarking. And that's what we need. I'm glad the Batangas State University is leading the way among the SUCs. Let's help Batangas State University, you know, be the model that other SUCs will look up to. It's very important that we create models to copy. I have my very strong loyalty with UP, but it's also for the purpose of enhancing UP further that I'm proposing this. I have 2 degrees from UP. I was president of UP. My loyalty lies in my alma mater, but I cannot help it but propose a way to shake the mindset of colleagues in UP. In fairness, you know, it's not really that widespread anymore. Like UP Manila, despite the opposition of students in UP Manila, I know, I've confronted some of them. They're able to proceed, like what Dr. Ted Herbosa has presented to us.
Thank you very much, Professor President Pascual. Dr. Mario, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Tina. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the presence of the presidents of 2 of PAASE's partner universities, President Beth Quirino Lajos of the Technological Institute of the Philippines, and President Dennis De Paz of the Eastern Visayas State University. My question is about the Mandanas ruling, and I'd like to ask for comments or the reactions of either President Pascual, President Garcia, about its implications to R&D, the national R&D. For those who, probably most of us are familiar with the Mandanas ruling, but just as a refresher, it says that the internal revenue allocation of LGUs should come from 40% of all national taxes collected by the Bureau of Internal Revenue, BIR, and the Bureau of Customs. So I wonder how the private sector is reacting to it, and what can be done to mitigate the potential, impact of that on our national R&D SMT. Sir, or Dr. Garcia?
Can I take a crack at that?
Oh, sure, Daddy.
Yeah, for your information, it's billions of pesos that has been unpaid by the national government since the Local Government Act was passed in 91, I think, or 1990. And it's billions of pesos that will be paid by the Treasury in tranches to local government units, the true IRA. So finally they won in the last year. Governor Mandanas of Batangas finally won his case in the Supreme Court. And this will now bring in money into local government units. The problem is everybody wants a piece of the pie. Healthcare wants a piece of the pie. Local universities, local science universities, and education wants a piece of a pie. But I think what I can say is that probably we should monitor that 5% of the Mandanas funds be allocated for research. I think that's the way to keep that protected, so that you will have many research hubs in local government units. Not only that, maybe from a supervisory or strategic perspective, we have like what we do in health. There's a national unified research agenda, and then you can ask different LGUs to come up with a research base of what we call the LUCs, right? The local universities and colleges. These are some of these that can actually have faculty that can actually be given grants. So maybe 5% of the grants be operationalized. The way I do it is probably, we also have something similar to a chief scientist, for your information. We have the National Academy of Science and Technology, which advises the Department of the government on all different aspects of science. So we have something similar. We don't have a chief scientist, but there's usually a president of the NAST, and that's probably comparable to the chief scientist in the UK or in Australia. So that's something that can monitor probably the expenditure of the Mandanas funds to the different local government units that will use it for research, whether it's going to be for agriculture, healthcare, climate change, disaster. I think we should make sure that the Mandanas money will also be used by local government and the local academic unit. If they don't have an LUC, maybe the local SUC can be the partner recipient of the grant that will implement research projects for that. So that's my take on the Mandanas ruling. But I don't think it will come that big, because it's going to be eaten. It's like a pie. Everybody there, you're supposed to feed 10 people. There are only 8 slices in the pie. so I think there's only going to be a mad scramble for the money in that. Maybe better to conceptualize building the platforms where research can happen in the future, and then partner with industry for some of the money to be able to get grants. I don't know, but we really need to study that. How much is that money? How much can be allocated to research, and then be able to have a strategy and how to maximize it for research and development.
Okay. Good luck.
Kayo naman, I'm being optimistic. Bring everyone to the ground.
Post the refrigeration quick.
I will say, well, the reason I said good luck is because we already have that fund. Remember that there is a tax that is for every so many, education should get it. I don't remember the name of that fund, but it ended up as a kitty for the local government units to go traveling all over the place.
That's right.
That is why it's very important that this the governance that Fred is talking about. That's the most important. All the things we have talked about here, we already have them. We have a science foundation as proposed by Joel Coelho. How long ago was the science foundation for science? We have that, no problem. We have this council that is already being talked about. We had, I told you about the Science and Technology Coordinating Council. Same, it's the president that headed it. And there was strong private sector. I told you, no less than JASA was the one sitting there. And we had the business sector. But governance is the problem. Kung ideya lang ang pag-uusapan, lahat ng pinag-usapan natin dito na pag-isipan na at naiba sa batas na. But the implementation has not worked.
Madam Chair, may I have the floor? If it's possible to ask your comment.
Dr. Cabellan, just
Yes.
keep it short.
First of all, I would like to pay my respects to the UP President, Alfredo Pascual, who was very, we had many good exchanges with UPMASA. I am stepping back to make an observation, and I am particularly incensed actually, because we seem to be climbing Sisyphus. We go up, then we make it, then we go down. And I am, I listened to President Garcia, where he says this has been said before, and it's the same thing. Innovation Council, whether it was PICARI that there, and then it's fallen down. And yesterday, I was listening particularly to the Chief of Staff, Dr. Sebastian, who says, what is different between the Philippines and Vietnam? And then I have listened to, it's this Prime Minister of Singapore, who built Singapore. And what struck me with Dr. Sebastian's observation is that first, they identify the problem instead of thinking of this big idea that we are going to set up this, set up that, but we do not really know what exactly is the goal. What is exactly is the goal? About yesterday, I was reading an article in the Acta Medica of the University of the Philippines. They discovered this virus, chikungunya, 1960.
Chikungunya.
Yeah. Sorry, Brea. And they just described it, but no one thought about how do you treat it. So I go back to the basic question. We are supposed to have an idea on how we go from here. Instead of climbing Sisyphus, go back and kulelat na naman tayo. Kulelat pa rin. Walang mangyayari. Madami nga tayong citations, ganyan. Number 36 na tayo, hindi na tayo number 54. The same thing. So, I was thinking is that perhaps we should do it, we should think differently. That we identify what we need, whether it is road safety, whether we in Bicol or the southern region, it is coconut, and whether it's fisheries somewhere else. I think that the idea is, well, where's PAASE, I think, should go, is to identify first what we need to solve before being this big idea of research here, research there. What are we solving? So I step back, but I'm really inspired with this conversation, because I think it gels for us what we need to do, identify where we are, identify what we need to do, and not just talk about this again 2-3 years from now. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Dr. Caballon. Let's give the floor now to Dr. Beth Lajos. She raised her hand. Dr. Beth.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to elaborate on what Esther shared earlier about private HEIs being disadvantaged under COA rules. For example, TIP, the school I represent, received a CHED grant for a Dareto project about marine refrigeration system designed for onboard small fishing vessels. Midstream, the CHED said, we cannot continue the funding because of the COA rules. So that's just one example. But the good news, on the other hand, is something along what Dr. Esther Garcia said. Indeed, there have been efforts along providing or promoting industry-academic linkages under the USAID Stride, which happens to be also a partner of PAASE, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, our very first DOST Cradle project, and we have several now, is an offshoot of our having met Dr. Gani Padolina of Pascual Pharma Corporation in one such gathering sponsored by the USAID Stride. So we now have this Cradle project, predictive tomography of organic plant extracts with intelligent design. So that's the good news, because from the DOST, private HEIs can actually receive grants. So, and then as a final note, because we're celebrating research in this forum, I would also like to share once again that Dr. Vince Faustino, a PAASE member, helped us, the Technological Institute of the Philippines, in our emergency ventilator project, which is moving towards commercialization, we hope. Thank you so much. And of course, I would like to thank Giselle and Mario for all the support. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lajos. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Dr. Willie Padolina, former NAS president. He is in this audience. Thank you for joining us, sir.
The father of Gani.
Yes.
Or Gani is his son.
I'd like to also acknowledge people behind the scenes. Dr. Lulu Harold is our scribe for this session. And we have Dr. Julius Liano, who's going to summarize for us what has been discussed today. He's our rapporteur. Are you ready, Dr. Julius?
Yes, good evening, everyone. So I'll walk you through a quick summary of what we have had this evening. We started with the presentation of Dr. Esther Garcia, who highlighted first the role of the higher education institutions and also brought forth the challenges and why these problems continue to exist or persist, and had a series of recommendations, including, and among them, the removal of the barriers to innovation. And she has eloquently discussed how to go about this, particularly looking at the processes that separates collaboration and also access to funding with respect to the conduct of R&D in the Philippines. Thus, her talk was about collaboration and integration as a whole. And it was followed by the presentation of President Alfredo E. Pascual, who mentioned, among many others, the various strides made in the University of the Philippines under his watch, particularly in institutionalizing the UP-TPDO, which handled the innovation framework, and as well as the various faculty faculty scholarships, grants, and awards, and concluded his talk basically on putting forward a possible restructuring of university boards or universities, moving towards a centered level of autonomy, coming with it responsibility and authority. And he also said that laying the groundwork was part of what he has done, and this basically indicated the path to the main vision, or to the vision which he had. This was followed by the presentation of Dr. Emiliano Molongaita, who delved on the RA 11293, which is the Philippine Innovation Act. And one of the highlights of his talk is basically putting forward the Australian approach to science leadership, primarily the National Science Council of Australia, where 8 among the 10 members are actually leading scientists, and also highlighted the chief scientist role and the chief entrepreneur's role in the national innovation framework. And this basically are parts of as well of the succeeding discussions. This was followed by the presentation of Dr. Herbosa, who also reiterated the various accomplishments in the University of the Philippines, primarily highlighting the very elaborate collaboration of the UP system with the different funding opportunities, particularly of the Department of Science and Technology. It was concluded by the presentation about the DOS NICER program on the disaster risk management in health centers, which actually highlights as well the role of the UP NIH and the UP-PGH in this discussion. He highlighted progress in research, which cannot technically happen without the industry and the private sector, which was also part of the highlights provided by the earlier speakers. And it was concluded by the presentation of Dr. Ronquillo, who talked about the very concrete examples of Batangas State University's engineering programs evolving and the various modalities by which they were able to put forward and use the various collaborative engagement with the private sector and with industry in making Batangas State University as a model for this tripartite collaboration, and in setting up first the KIST and of course the STEER, which are one or two of the highlights of this engagement. So this discussion tonight basically highlighted the removal of the barriers to STI, which Dr. Garcia has discussed. This includes human resources, training, funding, and the processes that are existing out there. It was also mentioned that universities can also consider being assigned to a specific work or a certain domain, which technically works on harmonizing between being highly specialized and being a totally comprehensive institution. There was also a wide discussion on the reluctance of universities to collaboration, particularly because of the lack, or also brought about because of the lack of communication between the academe, the industry, and the private sector, and highlighting the philosophical divide that actually lets this one persist. And lastly, it was also mentioned repeatedly the disruption of the education and innovation framework, and further maximizing the Philippine Innovation Act in the process of institutionalizing all these strides to make science, technology, and innovation part of our day-to-day life. So we have problems, we have solutions, we have opportunities, but as they say, it is not a matter of what you have, it is what you do with what you have. And we end that. Magandang umaga sa kanila, magandang gabi po dito sa Pilipinas. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat, Dr. Julius, for really highlighting the key takeaways, Lisa. No? Maraming salamat, Julius.
Oo, may slides pa.
And I think we could end this very productive day 2 of a week of pro-science activism, finding common ground for building a robust post-COVID STI ecosystem in the Philippines with our photo op. What do you think, Lisa?
Sure.
All
Everybody,
right, then.
please turn on your cameras. Let's have a group photo. Okay, everybody, get ready. Who's gonna take the picture? Me?
I'm also taking one. So sige, tayong dalawa para sigurado, ha?
Okay, everyone, please turn on your cameras and smile.
1, 2, 3.
Peace.
And then another panel. Okay. So again, cameras on, please. And then look at the camera and smile. All right.
Okay.
Hey, maraming salamat.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you.
evening.
Thank you
Thank you
all.
very much,
Thank you.
everyone. God bless.
See you
Come back,
tomorrow.
come
See you
back tomorrow
tomorrow.
for day 3. Oh, sorry, day
Day
yes,
3.
day
You're
3.
right.
Right.
All right.
Okay, come back
Bye.
tomorrow.
That's the topic.
Bye.
Good job.
Paase. Paase tomorrow.
Congrats.
Great job.
Great job.
Congratulations.
Hi,
Thank you all.
Lulu. How are you?